creepy dolls, ghost ladies, Donnie Wahlberg's mustache. There's plenty of scary elements in James Wan's 2007 horror film, yet it may surprise you to learn that one of the creators isn't exactly a fan. Due to studio tampering, the end result wasn't what the filmmakers originally intended, but even still, the movie has managed to gain a cult following. So join us as we get into all the juicy details of what the f*** happened to Dead Silence. While James Wan may be busy sailing the seas with Jason Momoa's Aquaman, back in the mid-2000s, he and Leigh Whannell had just made names for themselves with the film Saw. Things were moving very fast for the duo, and they quickly came up with a pitch. The pair wanted to go more supernatural with their next feature. Having seen Poltergeist at an early age, Wan had a great love for creepy dolls and puppets. So combining the two ideas, they had their central story. They also wanted to make sure that audiences knew that they weren't pigeonholed filmmakers and could do something drastically different than Saw. Universal accepted their pitch, and the project was quickly greenlit. Wan cites Sam Raimi as a massive influence on his career path. He saw how much Raimi was able to establish his own style in the horror genre and wanted to replicate that. He still holds him in an extremely high regard, which is pretty interesting given his current producing career, which has taken a pretty wacky turn. I say all of this to note that you'll notice a similar style and kinetic camera work, not to mention the similar career path. Wan's obsession with dolls continued on from the Billy puppet in Saw and was a central figure for Dead Silence.
Beware the stare of Mary Shaw. She had no children, only dolls. And if you see her, do not scream, or she'll rip your tongue out at the seam.
The story revolves around Jamie Ashen, who returns to his hometown after his wife's death. But what he discovers is a town full of secrets and a vengeful spirit known as Mary Shaw, who uses her old puppets to claim even more victims. The nursery rhyme you heard earlier is actually from the trailer, as they altered the rhyme for the movie itself. It instead ends with, "And if you see her in your dreams, be sure to never, ever scream." Pretty gnarly. A version of the script exists where the film takes place in the vaudeville era. Priests are brought in to deal with the haunted dolls, but they opted instead to show the era in a flashback and instead set the film in modern times. For the look of the main doll, who they also named Billy, Wan wanted the puppet to have a classic old school look. He wanted the hinged jaw, cropped haircut, and tuxedo. Personally, I've always felt that he looked like Slappy from Goosebumps, but that may just be this 90s kid talking. Ryan Quentin took on the main role of Jamie, with Bob Gunton playing his father Edward, and Amber Valletta playing his new wife Ella. Then we've got scene stealer Donnie Wahlberg as Detective Jim Lipton. For the role of Mary Shaw, Wan knew he needed someone who could strike fear in the audience with just a look. She also needed to have a stage presence, as Shaw was a performer. Looking at Broadway, they cast Judith Roberts as the vengeful spirit. Her look is genuinely creepy, with her gaunt features and bits of her skin peeling away. Originally titled Shh, Dead Silence filmed in Toronto, Canada, and had plenty of challenges. In recent interviews, it's clear that Whannell isn't the biggest fan.
Along the way of the Frankenstein of this script, some of the period stuff got shoved in there, and there were these flashbacks, and it ended up being this messy hodgepodge of different ideas to me.
He even stated in his blog that, after everything is said and done, I'm almost glad Dead Silence happened, because it gave me an extreme coalface lesson in what not to do. It was like learning to swim by leaping off Niagara Falls. I only write scripts on spec now, which means that I write them in my own time without getting paid, and then take them out into the world to see if anyone's interested. Never again will I enter the arranged marriage of selling a pitch. In the same blog, he revealed that the studio had brought in a script doctor. So who's to say how much of the script is actually Whannell's? James Wan seemed to have a slightly better time getting to create a properly gothic horror film.
I wanted to basically do a modern Hammer horror film. That was my goal. And and even early sort of the Universal monster heydays, movies that were very just drenched in atmosphere and mood, constantly fog bound. I'm a big fan of that kind of aesthetic.
Despite Wan wanting to differentiate the film from his prior work, Charlie Clouser was brought on to do the score. Since Clouser had done Saw, it has a very similar style, and marries the two projects together a little more than Wan probably would have liked.
Jamie!
And yes, spoilers if you haven't seen the movie, because this one does have quite the twist. It's revealed that Jamie's dad has actually been dead this whole time, and has simply been made into a puppet, being controlled by Ella, who is in turn possessed by Mary Shaw. It can be a little on the nose, but it provides for a fun ending, even if it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And on a bit of a sad note, the film is dedicated to producer Greg Hoffman, who unfortunately passed away in 2005. The film actually has an alternate opening and closing. We see a mysterious woman telling a bedtime story to a boy. It's very standard and helps set up the Mary Shaw character and what to do in order to survive an encounter with her. Then the alternate ending is very similar to the ending that we actually got, only a bit more literal. They over-explain the twist but bring it back to the boy in the bed, who we now see as Jamie, and it's Ella telling the story. And it's bookended the same way. Oh, and keep an eye out for the Billy puppet from Saw, who has a brief cameo in the film.
Now, who's the dummy?
Dead Silence released in the United States on March 16, 2007 and brought in $22 million during its domestic run. The movie was widely seen as a disappointment, garnering a 20% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. It was quickly forgotten, being paired the same year with another James Wan film, Death Sentence, starring Kevin Bacon. Both fun times at the movies that didn't manage to find their audience. Unrated. It was the gimmick that every comedy and horror film in the mid-2000s fell victim to, even if it only meant re-adding scenes that were purposely cut. So long as they could increase that runtime by 2 minutes, they would do it. It was a very dark time. Dead Silence dipped its toes into this trend and may be the most egregious example of an unrated version straight up ruining a film. While only 2 minutes of additional footage, these parts ruin the otherwise creepy Mary Shaw character. They add this CGI tongue that's supposed to be the tongues of her victims, but it looks like this weird octopus thing that makes every time they use it completely laughable. Just look at this shot with and without the stupid CGI. So much more scary without the CGI. There's a reason that when Shout Factory released the film on 4K recently, they only produced a 4K version of the R-rated cut. As a fan of the movie who hasn't been able to watch it for many years, I'm grateful that there's finally a proper release of the theatrical cut. While there are certainly some rough moments in the film, in particular with the acting and dialogue.
The mystery toy department is down the hall. This is the homicide department. So unless you could tell me how some puppet ties into your wife's murder, I don't see the relevance.
There's still a lot of fun to be had. Mary Shaw is an unsettling villain, and her dolls have a great and creepy look to them. The aftermath of her victims is quite the shock, and makes her presence that much more terrifying. It may not have gotten a fair shake on release, but horror fans have discovered this over the years, and the recently released 4K should only amplify that. But just make sure you're not too loud about it. You don't want Mary Shaw coming after you after all. Because remember,
Silent.